If you don't own land, if you don't own assets, if you don't own the platforms you work on, what exactly do you own? Welcome back to the channel. Tune in or go stout. People keep saying that we live in neo-feudalism. I used to think that was complete nonsense a few years ago, but when you look at housing, rent, debt, and the state of the digital platforms we use, I kind of understand why they say that. The world today heavily favors the landowners and the people who have power versus the plebs that have none. And as the system continues to take shape more and more, the answer becomes simple. We need a reset. But what that reset looks like is different to everybody. But when we look back in history, historically, there was one moment where labor actually gained power over the landlords. And this didn't happen because of policy or any sort of reform. It happened because half of Europe died during the Black Plague. Wages went up, the land became cheap, and the system that was holding average people down began to weaken. I'm not saying billions must die. I'm saying the last time workers got any sort of leverage is when something insane happened. The chances of another Black Plague happening are relatively low. It's not really the outcome of the future a lot of people are banking on. But if you go ask somebody who's Gen Z or probably early millennial on how they would solve this problem, I think a lot of the answers you would get would be relatively violent. A lot of people have come to the conclusion that the only meaningful change is going to come from some sort of chaos, because major change is the only thing that could actually reset the system. Given the state of our politics in America, I don't know if legislation is going to be any help. So many people who are in the non-owning class have come to the conclusion that we need to wipe out the boomers and as much of the elite as we can. But that's not to say that anyone's actually gonna do it. This is just kind of the sentiment around the crowd. And I think it wouldn't be as bad if people could get away from it for just a little bit. But the state of things is just kind of hard to ignore. If you feel locked out or powerless in the system, nothing makes it more obvious than housing, especially now. It's like year after year, the housing prices continue to go up, while every other month, the average age of a home buyer continues to go up. The first time home buyer age currently is like 40 years old, and the average home buyer is like 60 years old. And when you ask the reasons for this, you get a bunch of answers that are all kind of a crock of shit. When you blame companies like BlackRock and other international holding companies that have went around and bought US properties, people will say that they only make up a small portion and they don't really matter, and they'll tell you that it's boomers. But just like with everything else, boomers will deny responsibility for making the problem as bad as it is and will act like this just happened overnight. And while I don't blame the companies for all the issues, I'm not dumb enough to let them avoid accountability. When you have investors and corporations buying up homes, it's going to affect the prices of homes across the country, especially when those companies are paying double, sometimes even triple the price of the home. The early 2020s were really a fever dream where you could sell a home that would be worth maybe $90,000 in 2015 for maybe over $300,000 in 2022. It was definitely a seller's market. And as it currently stands, it's not a seller's or a buyer's market, which I think makes the problem even more infuriating for younger people. Like I said, boomers won't take accountability for anything, and they also won't allow any change to happen either. When you hear about zoning laws and other restrictions and regulations in the legislature that stop us from building homes and alleviating some of this problem, the number one people who are against changing the regulations and laws about zoning are the boomers who helped put those rules into place. And that's the thing that makes me the most mad, and many people don't really talk about. In America, a young person doesn't need to buy a mini mansion on 3,000 acres of land. Maybe they just need a starter home with a small lawn, just enough to build wealth, establish themselves in a community, and maybe grow to a better future. But because of a lot of short-sighted and just overall terrible zoning laws and policies, this reality is non-existent, and a starter home in America is just a small mini mansion on land that you can't even afford to take care of, but will be forced to because of the HOA that you are mandated to join because of other stupid zoning laws. I mean, boomers are the generation of the NIMBYs. And if you don't know what NIMBY means, it just stands for not in my backyard. These are the type of people that will scream from the mountaintops that we need to help our young people. We need to give them some sort of affordable option, but then refuse to allow that affordable option to be built near them. We can have change and we can make things affordable, guys, just not in my backyard. Do that shit in the South Side. The fact that you need a start in the world does not matter if it comes at the cost of property value. And people are waking up to the reality that they may may in near time become forever renters. The conversation around renting right now is pretty mixed. One person will tell you that it's a terrible idea and you shouldn't do it, while another camp of people will say that in today's modern climate, it is probably better to rent than actually buy a home, which I would have to agree with, and is one of the reasons that I hope that this does not last much longer and that some solution comes to the housing market. Because here's the kicker, even if no one's buying homes and only renting, rent would still go up because of the problems that we're facing today. As long as land stays limited and the boomers that own homes are sitting on cheap mortgages and refuse to leave, while at the same time having Wall Street buy up homes, you don't fix the problems, you kind of move the goalposts, but you still have the same issues that are raising prices. But instead of raising home prices, which won't affect the owning class as much because they hold a lot of the wealth, they will affect the cost of living in those homes. Essentially, when you rent, you are paying somebody else to occupy their dwelling. And if they know that that property is worth this X amount because every other property is selling for high value as well, then they will be justified in their mind and on paper to raise rent on you, the renter, which just punishes you for existing in a system, much like the reality of a commoner during the time of the Black Plague. And that's why I guess people call this neo-feudalism. You don't own land, you don't own the platforms, you just are kind of paying to exist. And the people at the top collect your cash at every single point. And I think that might be the part that makes this version worse. In traditional feudal systems, you actually know who's at the top, so you know who to negotiate with or overthrow if you have to, whether that be your landlord or the noble that controls over you. Today, it floats through so many different owners, you would assume the government would be able to fix a problem like this. With how reluctant they are to change rules and pull back on zoning, the government's role as being the regulator and almost the indirect director of the whole housing market has given private equity and investment firms the okay to continue doing what they're doing and manipulating the state of the market, because they really can't come out and do anything substantial to help people without addressing the boomer problem that we have. And if you look at what the politicians are saying, I think Donald Trump came out and said that we actually want to make home prices even higher. That's insane to say out loud, because when you say that you want to drive home prices even higher, you're essentially saying that you want to make homelessness more common. But I guess leave it to Donnie T to say something that no one else would say out loud. I think the reason he even made this statement, to give him some type of context, comes from the reasoning that more Americans are millionaires today because of the increase in home prices than ever, and for the first time ever they're seeing wealth like they've never seen before. But this is not real wealth, it's wealth on paper. It's what the crypto guys see in their Coinbase app before the token falls to zero. And while it makes you feel good to see that number on paper, you understand that the only way to realize those gains is by selling your house, which would make no sense when home prices are at record highs. And even less sense when you look at the fact that your house was maybe bought with a 5% interest rate, maybe even as low as 2% in some cases. And now the average mortgage sits at around 6%. You not only pay more up front, you pay more every month. Your interest is higher at the end of the cycle. And while you had an initial large sum of money, it's just getting eaten away at. Housing, like a lot of other things, has no clear solution, or at least not one that everybody wants to embrace. I mean, the solutions that we were given a few months ago were 50-year mortgages, which was a funny hoop people tried to jump through, trying to justify it in their minds as not the worst thing ever.
Like, it's fine, bro. I'll buy the house at 40. I'll take a 50-year mortgage out and my kids will finish paying it off.
I guess at that point, if you're taking a 50-year mortgage out, a house will probably give you generational wealth. But even with the way home ownership in America works, you don't really own the land even if you buy it and pay a 50-year mortgage off. And if you don't believe me, ask anybody that tries to build anything on their property. You have to check in with like 7 different local bodies in your area just to get one thing done, even if it's something small like upgrading your basement. Yeah, no, at what point do you just not see yourself as a free person if you don't own anything and you don't have any mobility to go anywhere else? Is freedom any different than the $1 million home prices that people are sitting on? If you're not able to realize it and actually use it to some sort, is it even there? And while housing is just the easiest pillar to see all this come true, and it's definitely not the only one, just like rent, the subscription-based economy that they're trying to create also reinforces just how broken everything is. It's broken because it's corrupt, and also, in my opinion, it's just very short-sighted and weak-minded, and kind of shows how low-level the thinking of the elite are in the grand scheme of plans. It's not a revolutionary idea to come commodify everything. And while that's been an obvious thing to do throughout history, it usually doesn't lead to good things. And because we make mistakes, we assume that we're going to learn from them, but somehow we keep going back in time and ending up at a point where usury, manipulation, and manipulated currencies are the route that we want to go down. And while the boomers are definitely not the cause of this, a lot of these old people benefited from a system, but they weren't really the ones creating the system. That's a different power above them. But the accumulation of wealth and therefore power in a system that benefits owners has corrupted our older counterparts, in my opinion. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Gen Z, millennials, people who are coming up in this time are not asking for a lot. A roof over their head, food to be affordable, and a living standard that is not terrible. Essentially, they want what the boomers had, even if it comes at some sort of increased cost, maybe not a 90% increase of cost over the past 40-50 years. But just like the nobles and the leaders of the late and middle age, the thought of giving up wealth, therefore power, is just unfathomable. Instead, relying on their grasp of power to control and quell any sort of uprising or rebellion that may happen. Because as much as they don't want to admit it, they know that the system is based on leverage, and to accept that it is based on leverage shows that it's not a fair playing field, which would justify the outrage of the working people. But I don't know, I try not to blame boomers for a lot of this, even though, as you can tell, it always kind of comes back to them. But the way I see it is like they were the first people onboarded to a system. So just like any new program that comes out, initially they give you all the features, they give you all the benefits, everything is actually really good. But as you become more reliant on that system and more ingrained in the user base, they start pulling back a couple of those benefits, Things that used to happen just cause are now a subscription fee or an add-on. While that example definitely has some nuance to it, boomers were the first people onboarded to the system. Post-World War II, Social Security, a 40-hour work week, a stability never seen throughout history. And as life continued to be good for the onboarders, they slowly started stripping away the luxuries that was presented to them. Affordable education, affordable housing, affordable food. And now we're left with the remnants of a system that is supposed to empower its young people. Instead, it has cannibalized them as early as possible, giving 18-year-olds access to credit cards and loans that have interest rates of 20 to 25%, making their relationship with money terrible right off the bat and leading them into a life of renting and subscriptions and just overall terrible financial habits because they don't see an alternative and never lived in a world that gave them that alternative. While there's not many bright sides, one of the positive things to look at is that renting currently is a better option, and in a lot of regions you'll actually get very competitive renting prices. That market is actually doing pretty well from what I hear, and while that might not be what you want to hear, I also think that a lot of the frustration coming from everybody across the board about the housing situation is gonna make the government act in some way, whether it be positive in the long run or not. I think everybody understands that this situation is unsustainable. Even as much as the government tries to act like it's not, this is no way for a country to run. Like, zoning laws need to be changed, single family mandates need to be rethought in a lot of areas, suburbs need to maybe be encroached upon. I don't know, there's a lot of things that we could do to fix this problem, but sitting on our hands and letting fake wealth be accumulated doesn't seem to be the brightest one. But yeah guys, I'm just ranting at this point. If you agree or disagree, let me know down below in the comments. How do you think the housing market is? Is it just terrible? Is there a way out of this situation? Or is Black Plague 2.0 the only way out? If you haven't already, like and subscribe to join the thread. And with that being said, thank you for tuning in. Until next time.